Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. The Scorpion King 2002 Movie Review. The Scorpion King is a 2002 action-adventure film directed by Chuck Russell. The film stars Dwayne Johnson, credited as The Rock, as the lead, with Stephen Brand, Kelly Hu, Grant Heslov, and Michael Clarke Duncan in supporting roles. It is both a prequel and spin-off of the Mummy franchise, with Johnson reprising his role from The Mummy Returns, and it launched the Scorpion King film series. The film was Johnson's first lead role. The events of the Scorpion King take place 5,001 years before the events of The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, revealing the origins of Matthäus and his rise to power as the Scorpion King. This name is a reference to a historical king of the proto-dynastic period of Egypt, King Scorpion. The film was released on April 19, 2002 by Universal Pictures. The film received mixed reviews and grossed $178.8 million worldwide against a production budget of $60 million. Before the time of the pyramids, a horde of warriors from the east, led by Memnon, conquers most of the local tribes. No tribe is willing to fight Memnon, as his sorcerer can foresee any attack. Matthäus, along with his half-brother Jessup and their friend Rama, are the only surviving Akkadians. The trio is hired by King Pharaon of the Free Tribes to kill the sorcerer. The Akkadians sneak into Memnon's camp but are ambushed by guards, who were warned by Pharaon's own son, Tukhmet, who had already betrayed and killed his father. Rama is killed, and Jessup is captured. Matthäus finds the sorcerer but discovers that the sorcerer is a woman, Cassandra, and spares her life before he is captured. After witnessing his brother's execution, Matthäus is buried up to his neck in the desert to be devoured by fire ants. He escapes with help from a fellow prisoner, a horse thief named Arpad, and vows to avenge his brother by finishing his mission. Matthäus sneaks into Memnon's stronghold, Gamara, with the help of a street urchin, Tutu. Memnon's sympathetic court magician, Philos, helps direct Matthäus to the courtyard where Memnon is training. Matthäus' plan is interrupted, as he has to backtrack and rescue Tutu, and barely escapes Gamara. However, he abducts Cassandra along the way. Memnon sends his warrior, Thorak, along with a group of his men, to retrieve Cassandra and kill Matthäus with scorpion venom. Matthäus leads Thorak and his battalion into a nearby cave during a sandstorm. Matthäus single-handedly kills Thorak and his men, but Thorak poisons him before succumbing to his wounds. Cassandra cures Matthäus with her magic, believing that he is the world's best chance to kill Memnon and bring about peace. Although unsaid, Cassandra has secretly fallen in love with Matthäus since he spared and rescued her from Memnon, who had held her prisoner since she was a child. Matthäus, Arpad, and Cassandra find Philos, who has perfected an explosive powder. However, they are ambushed by the Free Tribes, who are now under the rule of the Nubian king Balthazar. Matthäus defeats Balthazar in a fight and earns his reluctant respect and sanctuary, but Cassandra gives Matthäus two visions, one in which Memnon and his army slaughter the entire rebel camp, and another in which Matthäus dies facing Memnon. Matthäus reassures her that he will make his own destiny, and the two have sex. The next morning, Cassandra returns to Memnon, plotting to kill him and prevent her visions. Memnon is determined to see if Cassandra has her vision, putting her to the test using 6 urns, 2 of them empty, and 4 cobras within the urns. Matthäus, with help from Balthazar, Arpad, Philos, and the army of rebels, launches an assault on Memnon's stronghold at the same time. Balthazar kills Tukhmet during the battle, avenging Pharaon. The battle continues until a guard shoots Matthäus, as Cassandra predicted. As Memnon is about to claim victory, Cassandra kills the guard while Matthäus retrieves his bow and pulls the arrow from his back. He fires the arrow at the exhausted Memnon, sending him off the roof to his death. Philos and Arpad use the explosive powder to destroy the palace's foundation. With the battle over, the remnants of Memnon's army bow before Matthäus, who, by their law, is proclaimed the Scorpion King. In the aftermath, Mattheus and Balthazar share a peaceful farewell as the latter returns to his kingdom. Cassandra warns Mattheus that this period of peace and prosperity is only temporary. Undeterred, Mattheus claims that he will continue to make his own destiny. The production of The Scorpion King began as a spin-off of The Mummy Returns, 2001, centering on the character Mattheus, portrayed by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Recognizing the character's popularity, Universal Pictures decided to develop an origin story set in a distinct historical era, aiming to expand the Mummy franchise. The film marked Johnson's first lead role in a feature film, where he reprised the titular character introduced in The Mummy Returns. Johnson was paid $5.5 million for his performance, setting a record for the highest salary paid to a first-time lead actor, a substantial increase from the $500,000 he earned for his brief role in the preceding film. Produced on a budget of $60 million, the film was positioned as a major action release for Universal Pictures. Recognizing Johnson's global popularity as a professional wrestler, the studio adopted an international release strategy, launching the film simultaneously in 11 overseas markets. Johnson's established appeal in over 130 countries was a key factor in the production's global marketing efforts. The film was released on April 19, 2002, in the United States and Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom and Ireland, Hong Kong, Malaysia, the Philippines, Russia, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, and Thailand. The Scorpion King was released on DVD and VHS on October 1, 2002. It was released on Blu-ray on July 22, 2008, and was one of the first Universal titles released on the format. The Scorpion King was released on 4K on June 18, 2019. The film inspired two video games, The Scorpion King, Rise of the Octagon for the Nintendo GameCube and the PlayStation 2, which was a prequel to the film's events, and a sequel, The Scorpion King, Sword of Osiris, for the Game Boy Advance, in which Cassandra is abducted by the ruthless sorcerer Menthu and his lackey, the witch Isis, not to be confused with Queen Isis from the film, prompting Mattheus to undergo a quest to uncover the legendary Sword of Osiris to defeat Menthu and Isis and rescue Cassandra. The Scorpion King grossed $12,553,380 on its opening day and $36,075,875 in total over the weekend, from 3,444 theaters in the United States and Canada for an average of $10,475 per venue, ranking at number 1 at the US box office. The film had the largest April opening weekend at that time, beating The Matrix. This record would only last for a year before being surpassed by Anger Management in 2003. Internationally, it grossed $10 million in its first 5 days from 1,097 screens, and was number 1 in 9 of the 11 territories it opened in, including setting a record non-holiday opening in Singapore with a gross of $591,000. Grosses in the United States and Canada dropped 50% in the second weekend, but the film remained at number 1, grossing another $18,038,270. Internationally, it expanded to 35 markets and grossed $12 million. The film closed on June 27, 2002, with a total domestic gross of $91,047,077, and an additional $87,752,231 internationally, for a total worldwide gross of $178,799,308, against a budget of $60 million, making it a moderate box office success. The Scorpion King holds a 40% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, based on 134 reviews, with an average rating of 4.9/10. The site's critical consensus states, action-adventure doesn't get much cheesier than The Scorpion King. Metacritic gave the film a weighted average score of 45 out of 100, based on 30 reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B, on a scale of Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times, gave the film 3 out of 4 stars, writing, "Here is a movie that embraces its goofiness like a get-out-of-jail-free card. The plot is recycled out of previous recycling jobs, the special effects are bad enough that you can grin at them, and the dialogue sounds like the pre-pyramidal Desert Warriors are channeling a Fox sitcom. For its target audience, looking for a few laughs, martial arts and stuff that blows up real good, it will be exactly what they expected. It has high energy, the action never stops, the dialogue knows it's funny, and The Rock has the authority to play the role and the fortitude to keep a straight face. I expect him to become a durable action star." James Berardinelli of Real Views gave the film 2 stars out of 4, saying, "It's possible to make an engaging action/adventure picture of this sort, but The Scorpion King isn't it." Dennis Harvey of Variety gave a positive review, saying the film rouses excitement mostly from stunt work and actors' agility rather than CGI excess. Nathan Rabin of The Onion's AV Club gave the film a mildly positive review, calling it prototypical summer movie fare, designed to be consumed, enjoyed, and forgotten all at once. Owen Gleiberman of Entertainment Weekly gave the film a score of C+, calling it plotting and obvious but adding that The Rock holds it together. Jonathan Foreman of the New York Post gave a negative review, saying that The Scorpion King has none of the qualities epic sweep, relative originality, and heartfelt bloodthirstiness that made Conan so trashily entertaining. The film was nominated for Best Fantasy Film at the Saturn Awards, but lost to The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, also starred Bernard Hill. The Scorpion King blends historical inspiration with imaginative storytelling, resulting in a fictionalized portrayal of ancient Egypt. While the film draws from mythological and historical elements, it prioritizes adventure and fantasy over historical accuracy. The character Matthews, played by Dwayne Johnson, is loosely inspired by King Scorpion, a ruler from ancient Egypt's pre-dynastic period. King Scorpion is believed to have played a key role in consolidating power in southern Egypt before the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, which marked the beginning of the First Dynastic period, 3150 to 2613 BCE. Some historians associate King Scorpion with King Narmer, credited with uniting Egypt, though this connection remains speculative. Archaeological findings, such as the Scorpion tableau discovered at Gebel-Tijadi in 1995, provide evidence of King Scorpion's existence. The film's story of uniting Egypt's tribes echoes Narmer's historical unification of Upper and Lower Egypt but remains largely fictional, prioritizing myth and adventure. In the film, Matthews is depicted as an Akkadian assassin tasked with defeating Memnon, a tyrant attempting to control the fragmented tribes of Egypt. This portrayal significantly diverges from historical accounts of King Scorpion. While the historical figure's association with scorpions comes from depictions on artifacts like the Narmer palette, the film invents a fictional backstory involving scorpion venom to symbolize Matthews's connection to the creature. Other elements in the film are entirely fictional. Cassandra, a sorceress with prophetic powers, and Memnon, the primary antagonist, have no historical counterparts. While ancient Egyptian rulers are known to have consulted oracles, Cassandra's supernatural abilities were created to enhance the film's fantasy elements. Similarly, there is no historical evidence of a ruler named Memnon opposing King Scorpion. Director Chuck Russell acknowledged that the film prioritized visual appeal over historical accuracy. Modern elements, such as bikini waxing for characters, were included to enhance aesthetics, aligning with some ancient Egyptian grooming practices. Egyptians often wore transparent clothing suited to the climate and removed body hair using methods such as plucking, though specific details remain uncertain. The release of The Scorpion King coincided with increased public interest in the historical King Scorpion. This was further fueled by the History Channel documentary The Real Scorpion King, which aired in April 2002. A spokesperson for Universal Pictures clarified that the film's story was unrelated to the historical King Scorpion or archaeological discoveries. Following the film's release, there were plans for a sequel with Johnson to return as Matthews and go up against a new villain, Sargon, but these plans eventually fell through and the project was shelved. A direct-to-video prequel, The Scorpion King 2, Rise of a Warrior, was released in 2008 with Michael Copen as Matthews and Randy Couture as Sargon. A sequel, The Scorpion King 3, Battle for Redemption, was released in 2012 with Victor Webster as Matthews and Billy Zane as the villain, King Talus. The fourth film in the franchise, The Scorpion King 4, Quest for Power, was released in 2015. Webster reprised his role, while Michael Biehn, Rutger Hauer, Lou Ferrigno, and former WWE wrestler Eve Torres joined the cast. 37 Will Kemp portrayed the villain, Drazen. A fifth and final film, Scorpion King, Book of Souls, was released in 2018. Zach McGowan played Matthews, while Peter Mensah portrayed the villain, Neb Sirek. In November 2020, a reboot of the Scorpion King film series was announced to be in development. Jonathan Herman will serve as screenwriter, with the plot taking place in the modern day or in the 31st century, involving a contemporary adaptation of the Matthews of Akkad/Scorpion King character. Dwayne Johnson will serve as producer alongside Danny Garcia and Hiram Garcia. The project will be a joint venture production between Universal Pictures and 7 Bucks Productions. Hiram Garcia later gave an update on it a year later, saying it was still in development in last summer's The Mummy Returns. World Wrestling Federation super hunk Dwayne Douglas Johnson, better known as The Rock, made his big screen debut as the menacing Scorpion King. That brief appearance as a bow-wielding, centaur-like, half-human/half arachnid made quite an impression. Producer Kevin Misher recalls, "We were blown away by his charisma and presence in those first dailies for The Mummy Returns. Even though he was speaking his lines in Egyptian, he was incredibly compelling. We started coming up with a project for him right then and there." The project, an action-packed spin-off appropriately titled The Scorpion King, is a prequel exploring the character's rise to power over 5,000 years ago. The Rock plays Matthews, a muscle-bound Akkadian assassin. He's commissioned by a group of otherwise antagonistic tribes that band together as a last resort to thwart Memnon, a ruthless tyrant who threatens to wipe out their clans, one by one. Memnon's army has never tasted defeat thanks to a beautiful sorceress named Cassandra, whose mystical visions give the despot the information he needs to emerge victorious from any battle. It's Matthew's job to execute her, thus allowing the newly allied tribes to fight legitimately for their survival. But she's such a knockout, Matthews can't bring himself to destroy her. So he kidnaps her instead. The rest of the film's meager 89 minutes give the pair a chance to fall in love amid non-stop battle scenes that build to an ultimate showdown between Matthews and Memnon. Matthews shows mercy to a few folks, sparing rivals who then become his friends. Forced to choose between shooting Memnon or rescuing a young boy, Matthews helps the lad. During battle scenes, the good guys put themselves on the line for one another. Cassandra tries to stop the killing by telling Memnon that murder can never bring peace. Matthews defends Cassandra. On 2 occasions, she risks her life to save his. Told that he will die if he confronts Memnon, Matthews refuses to give in to fatalism, determining, "I make my own destiny." He also wants to establish a peaceful kingdom. Polytheism reigns, with many references to the gods. Cassandra is a sorceress who, on one occasion, uses the ancient equivalent of a Ouija board to help her summon visions. At other times she goes into trance-like states or channels healing power. Nothing raw, but lots of cheap titillation and peekaboo nudity. Cassandra is naked in several scenes, with hair or other objects concealing key anatomy and barely preserving the film's PG-13 rating. It is implied that her mystical powers are contingent on her virginity, which she gives away to Matthews. Nubian King Balthazar wakes up beside not one, but 2 women. Most of the females in this film, even the warriors, wear immodest clothing revealing much cleavage. A group of prostitutes propositions Matthews as he strolls through a marketplace in Gemara. Later he ends up in a harem full of eager young women. A small boy tosses a coin into a wishing well, from which emerges a nude Cassandra, shown from behind, though it is suggested that the boy gets an eyeful. While trying to treat his wounds, Cassandra straddles Matthews in a distinctly sexual manner. Without a doubt, The Scorpion King has the highest body count of any film so far this year. Before the film is a minute old, a man gets hit in the face with a flying metal star. That sets the tone for what is a relatively bloodless, yet headache-inducing barrage of violence. Countless people get shot with arrows, run through with swords, stabbed with knives, airborne and otherwise, hacked with axes, thrown from great heights or decapitated. An ambitious prince brags of killing his father, and proves it by producing the severed head. Some of the more graphic deaths, such as when Matthew's brother gets his throat slit, occur just out of the frame, but leave little to the imagination. Several soldiers are consumed by quicksand. Another is impaled on a stalagmite. Still other bad guys are subdued with bone-crunching punches, hung by the neck, consumed by ravenous fire ants, or incinerated in a climactic explosion. Also, violent acts are committed by and against women and children. Other negative elements, Matthew's hatred of Memnon is largely fueled by vengeance over his brother's murder. Similarly, just before killing a traitorous brat, Balthazar takes pleasure in being the one to administer payback. These heroes cut a swath through their enemies unfettered by moral conscience. The assassin and the sorceress. How romantic, hisses the evil, and strangely European, Memnon upon finding Matthews and Cassandra together. When you stop to think about it, they are a strange pair to be rooting for. The hero is a killing machine. The heroine is skilled in the occult. Hollywood sure has a way of convincing us that evil can be good. But even more disturbing to me was the film's non-stop violence mixed with intermittent sexuality, a potent adrenaline cocktail targeted squarely at pre-adolescent males. Although this isn't a particularly good film at any level, expect to see more of WWF champ The Rock, who, based on this Conan-esque role, could be the next Arnold Schwarzenegger. A lot of money went into the design of the Scorpion King, but even with such lavish sets, scenes, and special effects, the audience laughed at the movie, not with it, at several points. Why? Because the script was thinner than a bad comic book. In fact, the distributor gave out a comic book that may have contained more than the whole script, where the dialogue was punctuated by such wonderful dialogue as yip, and aha. Take the modern mummy movies and remove the American archaeologist and his moral sensibilities, and what's left is the Scorpion King. The movie starts with Matthews, his brother, and a friend, 3 surviving Akkadians, brutally destroying a Viking village in a violent, action-packed 3 minutes of senselessness. Cut to Matthews entering the camp of a ragtag group representing the remnants of various racial and ethnic hordes. The white-haired leader says they need to work together. The black Balthazar, played by Michael Clark Duncan, says he'll never work with the Akkadians, who are trained assassins. The leader gets everyone to agree to hire Matthews and the Akkadians to kill the sorceress who gives victory to the evil King Memnon. In the next scene, the 3 Akkadians are attacking the Egyptian-like outpost of King Memnon, who seems like a wimp but has a reputation for being a great warrior. Soon, it is discovered that Matthews and his friends were betrayed by the son of the white-haired leader of the remnant hordes. To prove his loyalty, the son cuts off his father's head and presents it to King Memnon. Memnon defeats Matthews, but the sorceress has her eyes on him and tells the king not to kill him with his own hands. So, the king buries Matthews alive with his head sticking out so fire ants can devour his head. Matthews is buried next to a thief who escapes and rescues Matthews. They in turn go back into the city. Along the way, they meet a little boy, who is a thief, and Matthews is propositioned by prostitutes. They meet the court scientist who is inventing gunpowder. Matthews ends up in the harem, where another group of scantily clad girls proposition him en masse. Eventually, Matthews captures the sorceress, and they escape to the desert. Memnon sends his best troops to recapture the Mattheus and the sorceress. People are slaughtered. Life and death battles take place, which resemble a cross between worldwide wrestling, all too familiar to the star of the movie, The Rock, and lightweight Errol Flynn antics. One adventure leads to another. Mattheus is wounded by an arrow dipped in scorpion blood. The sorceress mounts him and performs mouth-to-mouth resuscitation in a scene so silly that the audience broke out into laughter. Eventually, they work their way back to the city of Gomorrah, as in Sodom and Gomorrah, where Mattheus overthrows Memnon and becomes the Scorpion King. The Scorpion King is a little less than a paint-by-numbers plot. Less in that there's no real character arc, and there's no rhyme or reason to the plot. It is Conan without the scripting. Adventures are fabricated to complement the special effects. The Rock has a couple of good poses, but needs much more in the way of acting classes before he does another movie. Stephen Brand as King Memnon is a fairly good actor, but he looks like he has no muscles at all. In fact, he looks like he wouldn't stand up for a second against The Rock. One of the stranger things about the movie is how it jumps locations from a Viking village to Egypt to Gomorrah, and The Rock is only riding a camel. The ethnic diversity is also perplexing at a time in history when these groups were isolated by geography. It is clear that The Scorpion King is intended as a popcorn movie and will probably do well at the box office, but a little more substance would have been a great virtue. There are very few moral elements in the movie. Wine and sex flow easily, as does blood and conquest. This is a world where Darwin's survival of the fittest applies. As soon as The Rock disposes of King Memnon, all of King Memnon's evil hordes who were hacking up The Rock's friends bow down and choose him as their next king. He did not attain this position through decency, honor, good looks, or intelligence. He wins by brute force and perhaps with a little help from his friend, the occult sorceress. Although often the script discusses the occult and worship of other gods, these things were minor elements. However, the sorceress did have the ability to see the future, and the movie convincingly portrayed this ability in a way that susceptible children might think that it's available to everyone. The worst part, however, was the violence. It looked too much like fun. From backyard wrestling groups to private high schools, young children are emulating this type of violence. My sons tell me that this type of fighting, in a more real sense than that of their parents or grandparents, is in these days, and the type of fighting we're talking about actually gets people hurt. Where do you think you are going with my horse? To Gomorrah. Nothing we can say will stop him. Dialogue in The Scorpion King, and a wise move, too, because The Scorpion King is set thousands of years before the pyramids, so property values in Gomorrah were a good value for anyone willing to buy and hold. Here is a movie that embraces its goofiness like a get-out-of-jail-free card. The plot is recycled out of previous recycling jobs, the special effects are bad enough that you can grin at them, and the dialogue sounds like the pre-pyramidal desert warriors are channeling a Fox sitcom. The hero refers to his camel as "my ride." The film stars The Rock, famous as a WWF wrestling star. Vince McMahon takes a producer's credit, and on the basis of this movie, he can definitely star in movies like this. This story takes place so long ago in prehistory that The Rock was a hero and had not yet turned into the villain of The Mummy Returns, 2001, and we can clearly see his face and muscular physique, an improvement over the earlier film, in which his scenes mostly consisted of his face being attached to a scorpion so large it looked like a giant lobster. How gigantic was the lobster? It would take a buffalo to play the turf. The story: an evil scorpion king named Memnon, Stephen Brand, uses the talents of a sorceress, Kelly Hu, to map his battle plans, and has conquered most of his enemies. Then we meet three Arcadians, professional assassins who have been trained for generations in the deadly art, which indicates their training began even before they were born. The Arcadian leader Mattheus, played by The Rock, is such a powerful man that early in the film he shoots a guy with an arrow and the force of the arrow sends the guy crashing through a wall and flying through the air. No wonder he warns, "Don't touch the bow." How The Rock morphs from this character into the Mummy Returns character is a mystery to me, and, I am sure, to him. Along the trail Matthews loses some allies and gains others, including a Nubian giant, Michael Clark Duncan, a scientist who has invented gunpowder, a clever kid and a wisecracking horse thief. The scene where they vow to kill the Scorpion King is especially impressive, as Matthews intones, "As long as one of us still breathes, the sorcerer will die." See if you can spot the logical loophole. Matthews and his team invade the desert stronghold of Memnon, where the sorceress, who comes from or perhaps is the first in a long line of James Bond heroines, sets eyes on him and wonders why she's bothering with the scrawny king. Special effects send Matthews and others catapulting into harems, falling from castle walls and narrowly missing death by fire, scorpion, poisonous cobra, swordplay, arrows, explosion, and being buried up to the neck in the sand near colonies of fire ants. And that's not even counting the Valley of the Death, which inspires the Neo-Mametian dialogue, "No one goes to the Valley of the Death." That's why it's called the Valley of the Death. Of all the special effects in the movie, the most impressive are the ones that keep the breasts of the many nubile maidens covered to within 1 centimeter of the PG-13 guidelines. Who, a beautiful woman who looks as if she is trying to remember the good things her agent told her would happen if she took this role, has especially clever long, flowing hair, which cascades down over her breasts instead of up over her head, even when she is descending a waterfall. Did I enjoy this movie? Yeah, I did, although not quite enough to recommend it. Because it tries too hard to be hyper and not hard enough to be clever. It is what it is, though, and pretty good at it. Those who would dislike the movie are unlikely to attend it. Does anybody go to see The Rock in The Scorpion King by accident? For its target audience, looking for a few laughs, martial arts and stuff that blows up real good, it will be exactly what they expected. It has high energy, the action never stops, the dialogue knows it's funny, and The Rock has the authority to play the role and the fortitude to keep a straight face. I expect him to become a durable action star. There's something about the way he eats those fire ants that lets you know he's thinking, if I ever escape from this predicament, I'm gonna come back here and fix me up a real mess of fire ants, instead of just chewing on a few at a time. Can you feel it? The summer movie season is upon us with the release of The Scorpion King. It seems every year the summer season starts earlier and earlier. The Scorpion King fits right into the season that relies on movies with a lot of action, but little in the way of substance or plot. Dwayne Johnson, aka The Rock, stars in this prequel to his cameo role in The Mummy Returns from last year. The movie hones in on how Matthews, The Rock's character, goes from an assassin sent to kill the sorceress Cassandra, Kelly Hu, to falling in love with her and overthrowing the current Scorpion King Memnon, Steve Brand. There is little to no plot outside of the basic outline above. This movie is mostly used to showcase The Rock in a full-out action movie. I will say The Rock does a good acting job though and has already shown a greater range of acting ability in this movie than Arnold Schwarzenegger has shown in his career. A lot of people are killed in this movie by The Rock, but strangely enough no blood is spilled. This of course is so the movie can fit into the PG-13 rating. This movie has a lot of sword battles in it and the sound was very good. As a straight action movie The Scorpion King is pretty good. This movie has a lot of problems though. It stands up to neither of its prequels, The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, in acting or CGI effects. The movie was obviously not written with the comedic tone that Brendan Fraser ran with in the two Mummy movies. I feel The Rock could have benefited from a better screenplay. He certainly has the ability to do deadpan jokes like Brendan Fraser given his constant monologues on WWF shows. Why not allow him to do so? There are some jokes here and there, but I just feel they could have given The Rock more to work with and that could have brought the audience into the movie a little bit more. Hopefully this is just the beginning for The Rock and he can have a better story and more to work with next time than just flexing his muscles and doing straight out action. I think The Rock has the potential to excel in any brand of movie if he is given the chance. The other problem with this movie is it has little to no CGI and or special effects. I realize this was probably a very budget-orientated film that is relying solely on The Rock's name to sell the movie, but I was certainly expecting more CGI/ special effects. I was not expecting a level comparable to the two Mummy movies, but I just found it lacking. There is no magical evil in this movie outside of the sorceress and her ability to see the future like in the Mummy movies. If there is a sequel to this movie in the works, I certainly hope they have a higher level of CGI/ special effects in it. The Scorpion King is an average movie. I know not many people liked the Mummy movies as much as I did, but even the Scorpion King pales in comparison. The only person here of any interest is The Rock, and Kelly, who in skimpy clothing, and I am glad to see that Hollywood has given him a chance to have a film career. Hopefully he will get some more chances in an action movie with a better story or another genre altogether. With minimal special effects and plot, this is both a bad, the effects, and good example, the plot, of the traditional summer action movie. The Scorpion King is a good popcorn movie, one where you do not have to think about things and can just sit and enjoy what you are watching. It is also the beginning of a promising, yet very sequel-based, summer movie season that I am definitely looking forward to. I recommend The Scorpion King for The Rock, and if you just want to go to the movie theater and just enjoy a mindless film. Intermittently this summer, we'll be taking an historical tour of the Hollywood blockbuster by examining an older film that is in some way a spiritual precursor to one of the weekend's wide releases. This week, in Fast and Furious Presents, Hobbs and Shaw, Dwayne Johnson plays a character who was introduced as a villain in a franchise film before becoming a hero in this standalone adventure only glancingly connected to that franchise. Opinions are split as to whether this worked out well, but it's at least a hell of a lot better than the last time this scenario was tried. To file under things that people act like are new, but really aren't, in recent years, the films of the Conjuring franchise have come under a small amount of fire for wasting precious screen time introducing characters who have obviously no function in this movie, but will show up as the main villain in the next movie. This is annoying, but it's a well-established bad habit that goes much further back than the 2010s vogue for shared universes. Television has been playing this game, under the name backdoor pilot, since the 1960s, and though it's rarer in movies, it still crops up now and then. For example, in 2001, when the much-promoted sequel The Mummy Returns was heading towards its debut in the first weekend of May, one of the things that was front and center in the marketing was the appearance of beloved wrestler The Rock in a brief appearance as the Scorpion King, a villain also played by a world historically bad CGI effect. The Scorpion King was almost exclusively an off-screen presence in The Mummy Returns, but we were all promised that we'd love the character so much that we wouldn't hardly be able to wait for him to get his own starring vehicle just 11 months later, giving beloved wrestler The Rock his very first chance to be a leading man, after The Mummy Returns let him do his first big screen acting. The degree to which this worked out for Universal can be attested to by the relative success of the two movies. The Mummy Returns made $433 million worldwide, $202 million in the US and Canada, while The Scorpion King made $165 million worldwide, $91 of that coming from the US and Canada. And look, $91 million is a decent amount of money in 2002, but it's quite a big fall off. Which is maybe due to it being the case that, actually, we were not that excited by The Scorpion King, who looked like a shitty polygon glob by the standards of 2001 era video games, let alone 2001 era movies. And maybe it's just due to it being the case that, even if we did want a Scorpion King movie, I mean, Christ knows I didn't, but I didn't want The Mummy Returns, either, we didn't want this movie. The Scorpion King is, to be blunt, completely fucking awful as a prequel, presenting a version of the character who doesn't resemble the one we met in the 2001 film in any way except in The Rock's extremely distinctive physique. And awful as an action-adventure set in a generic ancient Middle East and North Africa, by which the film means that everything that isn't the desert is cities made out of sandstone. It's a little weird going back to this film, years after beloved wrestler The Rock fully completed his transformation into beloved comic action star Dwayne Johnson, and realize that once upon a time, this kind of trashy third-rate Conan the Barbarian bullshit is what Hollywood thought was the right use of his talents. It's not that he's exactly bad in the role, though he is pretty bad in The Mummy Returns if my years-old memories are right. It's just that he's profoundly generic. Ever since Johnson successfully recalibrated his career from muscly dude being in muscly movies to big comic cornball, which, as I counted, was hinted at in 2005's Be Cool, started in earnest with 2008's Get Smart, and was solidified no later than 2013's Pain and Gain, in which being goofy while also being muscly was the joke. He has become such a big personality on screen. We need not to commit to loving or hating this personality in order to agree that, at least, he's got a lot of it. Not so in The Scorpion King, which only gives him about 5 minutes to pal around with a doe-eyed child and demonstrate his big weightlifting teddy bear vibe, one opportunity to do that eyebrow thing that he does, and unless I have forgotten something, not one actual laugh line. He's basically just playing the guy with large arms and larger pecs, a role that has been written more or less the same way since the 1960s. And, of course, why wouldn't that be the case? The track record for wrestlers turned actors has always been dire, so why would the filmmakers want to risk having Johnson play anything other than a bland slab of perpetually underdressed beefcake intensely stating tedious expository lines before soulfully betting the slightly less underdressed female lead? It's just weird to realize that the Scorpion King is sitting right on a secret weapon and is patently unaware of the fact. That's of minor historical interest, at best. What it leaves us with is a generic beefcake in the kind of movie that generic beefcakes tend to get cast in. Though I am paying the Scorpion King an unwarranted compliment by calling it generic. It's pretty basic stuff. Many thousands of years ago, unsurprisingly, the film is confused on the details. The phrase Scorpion King points to a pair of Egyptian rulers from around 5000 to 5200 years BP, and this accords with The Mummy Returns, but a big deal is made about how Johnson's character is Akkadian, which makes it around 1000 years later. But what the hell, you can almost hear the screenwriters yawning. It's all ancient shit. An ancient tyrant named Memnon, Stephen Brand, who is presumably from what is now Egypt, was laying waste over some region that we can pinpoint as either the Levant, Mesopotamia, or the Arabian Peninsula. 3 Akkadians, of whom only Matthews, Johnson, will be around long enough to bother learning his name, have been hired as assassins by the peoples currently failing to fight off Memnon's hordes, and they fail in this attempt. Matthews commits himself to revenge, after Memnon kills his brother, and kidnaps the warlord's virgin seer Cassandra, Kelly who of course doesn't really want to serve Memnon anyway, but also doesn't much hold with being kidnapped. They end up finding their way, along with excruciating comic relief Arpad, Grant Heslov, into the camp of the anti-Memnon resistance, led by suspicious King Balthazar, Michael Clark Duncan, and Matthews has to prove himself trustworthy and capable enough to lead an assault against Memnon's stronghold in the biblical city of Gomorrah, no less. This is the plot of basically every ancient world movie, right down to the virgin seer who'll lose her powers after she has sex with the hero. Oops, spoiler alert. So here's what I don't get. How did screenwriters Stephen Sommers, William Osborne, and David Hayter, working from a story treatment by Sommers and Jonathan Hales, along with director Chuck Russell, make such a fucking hash out of it? You don't need to take my word for it. It's matter of record that the film was so undernourished that new material had to be written in the fly just to get it up to feature length, and I do mean just. The theatrically released cut of the film is 92 minutes long, and while I greatly appreciate that, this is already suffocatingly boring 3 times over without trying to crack the 2-hour mark. It's not the kind of running time that a film with pretenses to epic adventure status was going to settle for in 2002. That's a chintzy B-movie running time, and to be sure, The Scorpion King is a chintzy B-movie. But it has some serious delusions of grandeur. Let's not lose the thread, though, the movie had to be refashioned and padded out, and I imagine for this reason, it's more or less incomprehensible. The plot is, again, so boringly cliched that it almost doesn't bear talking about it, and there are dozens of models one could copy, and yet somehow, it's completely mystifying how we get from one point to the next. At every point, it feels like we're all of a sudden in a new scene, in a new location. It is the choppiest damn movie. It's no shock that's true of the editing qua editing. This was 2002, and a certain illegible flurry of shots was what you expected of lousy, CGI-heavy action B-movies on steroids in 2002. But for the overall story structure to be choppy? Now that's something. At any rate, it's hard to follow and doesn't reward the effort of following it. It's not good drama, and it's not good spectacle. The film is kind of scuzzy and washed out with a dirty yellow hue that only calls attention to how fucking much of the movie takes place in lifeless deserts of a sort that no human civilization would ever call home, but it's how Americans imagine the ancient Middle East must have looked, so we're stuck with it. The sets are boring, the costumes, when they are more than loincloths, are colorless. The CGI is utterly hideous. Nothing is as bad as the Scorpion King effect from The Mummy Returns, largely because the Scorpion King mostly eschews any and all paranormal plot elements, just Cassandra's psychic abilities, which is an odd choice for a movie that claims to be the origin story for a messed up scorpion man. But it does mean that the film can limit its attention to mostly old-fashioned sword and sandal type of VFX work, with fancy CGI left mostly for touch-up detail, the creation of unbelievably shitty-looking cobras, and the like. The whole thing is a grating, anti-fun mess, with almost nothing entertaining in any way, unless it's the limited amusement provided by the jarringly casual, modern performances that Johnson and Duncan bring to bear on their arch, ancient times dialogue. They're both extremely charismatic actors, something not really true of anyone else in the cast. Bernard Hill, as the anachronistic inventor of gunpowder, at least has his cute grandpa thing, but the Scorpion King can't even figure out how to use charisma, and so they're both charmless and painfully straight-laced, but unable to find anything like the right kitschy vibe to at least pretend like it's several millennia ago. Did I say limited amusement? I suppose I meant cringy embarrassment. Which is, to be sure, the most active emotion the Scorpion King is ever able to spark, so better than nothing. The Scorpion King is a Conan movie. All the way. A big, ridiculously over-muscled hero, not so dim as everyone expects, with a murdered brother to avenge, an evil warlord to defeat, superb fighting skills and a foolish weakness for women. A cowardly comedy sidekick who tags along to share in the spoils of his adventures. A loyal steed. A beautiful sorceress who starts out distrusting everybody but gradually comes to like the hero so much that she risks her life to heal him from his injuries in the desert. Desperate tribes of people in need of a leader. Sword fights. Chases. Ancient citadels. Even that old matinee favorite, the hero running along taking shelter behind a rolling gong. We've seen it all before, but the remarkable thing is that the Scorpion King does it well, and does it with such good humor that it is almost impossible to dislike. In the central role, The Rock, or Dwayne Johnson, as he now prefers to be known, perhaps the first time since Aliens that anybody has wanted to be called Dwayne, gives a surprisingly confident and convincing performance. He's not required to stretch his acting talents, but he's not just another wooden beast master. The film's main weakness is its villain, who simply doesn't have the charisma to achieve a balance, nor to convince as a man who has led thousands into war. The film's strength is in its technical crew. Whilst the direction is formulaic, it's always spot on, the pacing is superb, and the choreography, especially where multiple fights are going on at once, is exceptional. Those scenes are further enhanced by clever use of lighting, something which made this film's predecessor, The Mummy, stand out from the crowd. This is not a deep film by any means, nor is it particularly memorable, but it's great popcorn entertainment. Robert E. Howard would have been proud for the most part. The Scorpion King is just what you think it will be, a series of smackdowns with opponents in barbarian garb and elaborately masculine, that is, large, jewelry, with time set aside for Dwayne Johnson to display his considerable self-love. True, Johnson plays a character who is not precisely The Rock, who rides a camel and beds a pretty girl, Kelly Hu, and who works his way through a plot that hasn't been written by the WWF scribes. But these details are incidental. He is The Rock, and that's what you're paying cash money to see. That Vince McMahon executive produced surely has something to do with the film's more predictable pieces being in place. The plot concocted by David Hayter, Will Osborne, and Mummy Returns maker Stephen Summers, from a story by Jonathan Hales, is essentially extended backstory on Matthews, who made his first, brief, and English-languageless appearance in The Mummy Returns. Now you're reminded that he lives around 3000 BC, as a member of a clan of cutthroats who kill for money, also known as the Akkadians. At the beginning of The Scorpion King, Matthews is hired to assassinate Cassandra, who, the gorgeous sorceress who foresees battle outcomes for the evil warlord Memnon, Stephen Brand. Matthews begins his mission full of sand, as they say, but soon finds himself in love with Cassandra, whose near nudity, occasionally wet, remains within PG-13 range by strategic arrangement of her long hair. Deciding to take out Memnon instead of the woman, as he comes to call her affectionately, as in, "I've come for the woman, and your head," Matthews faces down legions of red-turbaned flunkies on horseback, crashes through windows, fires torpedo-like arrows, blowing adversaries through walls, chomps on menacing fire ants, and vows vengeance for his murdered brother. He also puts a sandstorm to good use, and adopts as his requisite comic sidekick a nerdy horse thief named Arpad, Grant Heslov, who warns him that no one goes into the Valley of the Death, that's why it's called the Valley of the Death. Nothing stops Matthews, though. By film's end, he's convinced a whole squad of warriors to ride with him into the infamously rowdy city of Gamara to set it straight to rescue Cassandra and beat down Memnon. One of these new buddies is an initially antagonistic warlord, the Nubian Balthazar, Michael Clark Duncan. In fact, they become such good friends that Matthews feels able to kid the mighty touchy Balthazar about his garish harem girl disguise, referring to him as Miss All This Is to Be Expected, from the action scenes to the one-liners to sidekicks to the deeming damsel in distress, who proves quite capable of taking care of herself, thank you. And yet, despite, or because of, its predictability, and despite, or because of, its critical drubbing on its release, mainly by way of unfavorable comparisons to other, primal barbarian movies of the Arnoldian kind, The Scorpion King is a smashing success. It crushed all competition at the box office, making a whopping $36.2 million during its first weekend. Certainly, much of its appeal has to do with The Rock, the coolest, smoothest WWF wrestler ever, the much-beloved People's Champion. He's the guy who wrestles while wearing his movie star sunglasses, whose single-arched eyebrow speaks the proverbial volumes, and who has never met a camera that hasn't drooled all over him. The Rock is a star, straight up. The fact that he also appears to have a sharp sense of humor about his career, his long-standing theatrical conflict with McMahon, his incredible physique, and his own as yet limited acting abilities certainly endears him to his fans, and perhaps to those only considering becoming fans. But even as The Rock's total magnificence recalls the glory days of Schwarzenegger, there is something fundamentally and crucially different about this next generation of action heroics. The shifting dimensions of race identifications and race politics in The Rock's movie universe, and this is a universe that extends far beyond that of the still predominantly white WWF. The Scorpion King is one amazing jamboree of race mixing and, at some level, even race rethinking. In part, this is a function of the rush hour phenomenon, the sudden discovery by producers and greenlighters that a blockbuster hit might be made with stars who are not white, and beyond this, the villains can all be identifiably imperial. Memnon speaks with a vaguely Euro-British accent, and his second, the insipid Prince Tachmet, Peter Facinelli, currently starring in Fox's Fastlane, might be reduced to this high concept, Snotty class privilege. As well, this shift is a function of a more general beiging of race difference and The Rock's crossover celebrity, which tends to render race invisible, or at least undiscussed. He's been described in reviews of the film as charismatic and exotic, without overt reference to his background. Miami-born, he's the grandson of Samoan wrestler Peter Maivia, or to whose Chinese, Hawaiian, and British heritage. Moreover, the Good Guys team is primarily comprised of Balthazar's mixed-race Amazonian ass-kickers, including Queen Isis Sherry Howard, plus an older white guy scientist, Philos, Bernard Hill, who behaves more or less like the professor on Gilligan's Island, pseudo-inventing catapults and gunpowder, and quite pleasantly surprising himself when his experiments work out. As they infiltrate the castle and the film heads toward its slam-bang, hugely actionated finale, the SK's motley crew occasionally resemble the intrepid posse in The Wizard of Oz, except that they spread out, much like the characters in The Mummy Returns, in a concerted effort to provide multiple climaxes. Isis and her girls battle a bunch of dead-meat red turbans, Balthazar takes out that wussy Boytukmit, and Matthews spends several delectably drawn-out moments with his arch-enemy, the egomaniacal slimeball Memnon, complete with the fearful moment when Cassandra's vision of her fabulous new boyfriend's death appears to come true, in slow motion, with hair flying and flames lighting up his perfectly oiled pecs. It's a beautiful, and beautifully corny, sight, visibly grander and costlier than The Rock might have managed in a wrestling arena. The investment pays off. Dwayne Johnson is well on his way to international superstardom. And perhaps, action pictures are on their way to reflecting the vastly diverse audience they pursue so furiously. As if to underline this furiosity, the Universal DVD, a gorgeous transfer, includes all kinds of extras, some more desirable than others. Some bonus materials are promotional and / or superfluous. Spotlight on Locations is a mini travelogue. Wholly corny trailers advance the Universal theme park and the Scorpion King PlayStation game 2. Others are informational. Ancient World production design highlights the work of designer Ed Veros and DP John R. Leonetti's efforts to make Sodom and Gomorrah in Southern California. The special effects shows the development of the cobras and the fire ants, and a series of typed panels lay out the historical best guesses and myths surrounding the Scorpion King. A segment titled Preparing for the Fight has Russell describing his ideas concerning the fight scenes. First of all, every fight tells a story, such that concept and choreography come together. Outtakes include antics with camels and snakes, as well as a bit where Clark Duncan struggles briefly while mounting his horse, following his advice for the SK to rule well, as The Rock and Kelly who look on. Once astride, he looks down on The Rock and says, not missing a beat, remember, Nubian eyes will be watching you, Scorpion King. Solemn. And then, a segment focusing on the relationship between the two actors replays another version of this difficult mount, with laughs, accompanied by Russell's observation that the two actors were great friends and competitive as well, rehearsing their moves for weeks, taunting each other, and generally having a grand time. On the disc, they're still arguing over whether The Rock knocked Mike out or knocked him down. Of all the extras, though, the commentary tracks are the most pleasurable, as well as enlightening. There are two: the enhanced feature commentary by The Rock, whom you can also see as he records the commentary live, for some reason, and the apparently regular one by director Russell, who is clearly thrilled with his good fortune. During The Rock's track, if you click on some sign in the corner, he'll appear occasionally in a pip box. While the movie runs, wearing a soft brown shirt and headphones, he looks up at an off-screen screen, telling you what an image might be establishing or that he really likes a scene. He also reveals some tricks that enhance his performance as the SK. For instance, his snappy whistle is dubbed in, or someone is off-screen poking a camel in the ass to get it to turn on cue. The most Rock-like moments come when Johnson comments on his own superguy persona. While he strides through a marketplace, a stunning prostitute offers to help him with his cramped muscles. On the commentary track, Johnson answers her, "No you can't, honey." they're not ready for the Scorpion King. Russell's comments are more concerned with his vision for the film, with attention to the travails of working on a large-scale project. He talks you through the shooting schedule, experiences on the set, and his thinking about characters and actors, scenes, and stunts. He wanted to use as few camera tricks and wire gigs as possible in the fight scenes, to maintain a visceral immediacy and real kinetic sense, and keep it from becoming so stylized that it became an ballet or an exhibition. The Rock, he says, and he calls him The Rock, has a deep commitment to acting, bringing as much passion to the role as he does to his athletic endeavors. Good to know. By the end of the film, Russell confesses, he added the epilogue, where everyone says goodbye and looks forward to making their own destiny, as a curtain call for each of my characters. After an amazing, multiplayer action sequence, to show off The Rock's charisma, very simply, he says, I wanted to have an opportunity to have The Rock smile. He played a really tough character this entire film, and in person, The Rock is really a charming guy. And I thought we ought to try to end the movie with a little of that charm. It's a good insight, for that, above all, is what The Rock is cookin'. I'm struggling manfully to avoid a review filled with wrestling references, so we'll keep this simple. Luckily, it's a pretty simple movie, hardly a dull moment, admittedly, but hardly any especially exciting or memorable ones either. The Rock plays the Matthews, last of his tribe, an assassin hired to kill the evil warlord Memnon, Brand. When Matthews' brother is killed, it all becomes rather more personal, and sorceress Cassandra, who, adds another dimension. Or about 0.1 dimensions, anyway. Making fractionally over 2 in total. If this is no more than you'd expect, neither is it any less, and everyone involved treats things with the correct level of seriousness, i.e. none at all. The PG-13 rating limits things somewhat, it only plays at being sexy and violent, there's no blood, and the only nipples are The Rock's, while you can't help wonder about the morals of a film which says sweeping across a continent to create an empire is bad, yet assassinating the emperor and ruling in his place is good. Not that such thoughts deserve consideration, that the film gives them a chance to arise is perhaps significant, however. It needs to be more absorbing, instead of largely predictable. By the end, I was almost expecting Hulk Hogan to run in and bash The Rock from behind with a chair. Between this and resisting the frequent urge to shout "Tabli, Tabli," it's questionable whether or not you might be better off watching Raw is War instead. If there was ever a franchise that did not need a spin-off, it was the Brendan Fraser series The Mummy. Somehow, Dwayne Johnson, then known solely as The Rock, made enough of an impression as a CGI'd head on a massive scorpion that Universal Pictures decided to give the wrestler-turned-actor his own sand and sword style movie. What they received was a generic, if not awful, fantasy film. It pretty much goes without saying that Dwayne Johnson is the best aspect of the whole series, but what the Scorpion King manages to do is demonstrate how far The Rock has come in terms of acting. Here he is a muscle-bound warrior delivering one-liners and poorly written exposition. He does this well, and the star power, even back in his very first major role, is clear. This means that the action sequences and the battles between Johnson's assassin for hire and the many faceless soldiers sent his way, are all staged perfectly well. He is a competent action hero even then, and although his acting comes across as slightly forced, there is a charm to him that explains why he is such a success today. Unfortunately, his star power wasn't enough to build a whole movie around him, and the Scorpion King doesn't have enough to elevate it above B-movie levels. It has a despicable villain, played with all the usual grimace and snarl by Stephen Brand, as well as a damsel in distress who starts as a target for our hero and soon, predictably, becomes a love interest. The fact that she spends most of the film practically naked, wearing the most impractical clothes for a desert adventure, should tell you all you need to know about the level that the Scorpion King is aiming for. The characters do their jobs and the actors play them ably. It doesn't save the writing though, which is full of cliché, predictability, and all the usual plot beats that we have seen 100 times before. Nothing here is surprising, but it never feels terrible either. It just plods along, happy to add to the many numbers of fantasy movies that are instantly forgettable. This is because it never aspires to be more than a B-movie and epic. If it wasn't for the starring role of Johnson or the links to a previous franchise, it seems that this movie would have fallen into bargain bins the world over, as did the non-rock starring sequels. This is demonstrated best when the CGI is used to poor effect. From unconvincing fire ants through to poorly realized snakes, the movie relies heavily on CGI at times and manages to break the suspension of disbelief by having such a poor representation of it. After the incredible success of last year's Mummy sequel, another foray into ancient Egypt was inevitable. But instead of the continued adventures of Brendan Fraser, the Scorpion King acts as a prequel to the events depicted in The Mummy Returns, and even the first Mummy. The film opens with a spectacular sequence that finds Matthews, played by, no surprise, The Rock aka Dwayne Johnson, rescuing his brother from impending death. The film quickly shifts gears, and we're soon introduced to Memnon, Stephen Brand, an evil emperor bent on world domination. They always are, really. Matthews has no quarrel with Memnon, as a bounty hunter of sorts, he only hates who he's paid to hate. But Memnon raises Matthews' ire when he murders someone close to him, so, not surprisingly, the rest of the film entails Matthews' quest to kill Memnon. The Scorpion King, by all rights, should be a terrible movie. The first two Mummy movies were over the top, wall-to-wall special effects extravaganzas but little else. Unconcerned with silly things like plot or character development, those films took off like a roller coaster and never looked back. So, it would have been reasonable to expect a similar structure from The Scorpion King, which was co-written, though not directed, by Stephen Sommers, the man responsible for The Mummy and its sequel. But surprisingly enough, The Scorpion King proves to be goofy, silly, and even a little campy, but most of all, it's just fun. Johnson knows he's a terrible actor, but he manages to infuse so much charisma into his performance, it almost makes up for the fact that he couldn't act his way out of a paper bag. Upon entering a harem filled with a dozen beautiful women, his raised eyebrow says more than any dialogue could. The rest of the cast is mostly forgettable, especially an awkwardly placed comic relief sidekick. How out of place is he? The character doesn't even have a name, but let's face it, everyone going to see The Scorpion King wants to see The Rock. While both Mummy films were filmed abroad in exotic locations like Morocco and Egypt, The Scorpion King was shot entirely in Arizona. But considering a good portion of the movie takes place in the desert, it doesn't seem too conspicuous. Chuck Russell, best known for directing The Blob and The Mask, takes over the reins and does an admirable job. The climactic battle resembles something out of Star Wars, with 3 separate fights occurring at the same time. Russell keeps the pace brisk, though some unnecessary subplots, added to beef up the running time, no doubt, tend to slow things down. So, while hardcore fans of the first 2 Mummy films will likely be disappointed in the lack of big special effects, The Scorpion King is nevertheless entertaining enough to warrant a cheap matinee. This review request serves 2 purposes. The first is that it's a trilogy and one that, by the end of these reviews, will probably make the Jurassic Park trilogy look so much better. The second purpose it serves is to knock out another review request from co-worker Eric. Today's movie is not the movie that was requested, but the first part in the trilogy. Eric suggested that I review the third movie, which will most likely be awful. I decided to watch all 3, so that I don't get left out of the highly cerebral storyline. Well, let's jump into it. The first movie in this trilogy is a spin-off of another movie franchise called The Mummy, making this movie The Scorpion King, written by Stephen Sommers, William Osborne, and David Hayter, directed by Chuck Russell, and starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Stephen Brand, Kelly Hu, Michael Clark Duncan, Bernard Hill, Grant Heslov, Peter Facinelli, Branscombe Richmond, Roger Rees, Ralph Moeller, and Tyler Main. The Akkadians are the baddest group of assassins in the land. The last 3 remaining Akkadians, Matthews, The Rock, his half-brother Jessup, Branscombe Richmond, and some other random dude, are hired by King Pharaoh, Roger Rees, to kill the sorcerer that is bringing victory to the Egyptian Emperor Memnon, Stephen Brand, with her prophetic powers. The three Akkadians get into Memnon's camp and are instantly ambushed, having been betrayed by King Pharaoh's son, Tukhmet, Peter Facinelli. Matthews escapes the ambush, but the other two Akkadians fall. Matthews gets into the tent of the sorcerer but finds that it is not some old dude as you'd expect. Instead, it's super hot Cassandra, Kelly Hu. Memnon and his troops enter the tent and capture Matthews, but Cassandra predicts that horrible things will happen to Memnon if he orders Matthews executed. Instead, Matthews is sentenced to be buried in the sand and have ants eat his head, along with horse thief Arpad, Grant Heslov. Together, they escape, and Matthews sets his sights on getting revenge on Memnon. Much like the majority of the movies that this movie spun off from, I found this movie to be a lot of fun. It's not particularly smart or well written, but it's fun and has some great fight scenes in it. And, since that should be what you expect when going into a movie like this, you should leave fairly satisfied. The opening of the movie serves little purpose to the story and is only there to show that The Rock is a badass. He's just going in and saving his brother from some small group of people that are going to kill him, and he does with extreme prejudice. Immediately afterwards, this scene is completely forgotten about because, as I said, it had nothing to do with the story. But it was a pretty badass fight. It sets up how badass The Rock is by having him inexplicably climbing up a cliff with a giant boulder attached to his back, the point of which I still don't know. Then he drops in through the chimney, emerges from a cloud of smoke, and whoops ass on everyone in the tent single-handedly. He even knocks someone out by wrapping his bow around their head, pulling it taut, and letting it snap on their face. That's the international sign of a badass. The movie's actual story picks up right after this scene. It's a decent story without any surprises, but it's mainly just set up for more fights. It's a basic tale of revenge that is then superseded by taking out an evil ruler for the greater good, then you throw a little love story in the middle. But the action and the fights are fun, some of the dialogue borders on clever, while other parts of the dialogue are just cheesy. Like at the end of the Clash of the Titans, The Rock and Michael Clark Duncan, where The Rock says we are brothers in the same cause, and should probably be given an award for delivering that line while keeping a straight face. It's the kind of movie that you just need to shut your brain off and look at all the pretty colors. If you don't, you may get bothered by the fact that they totally ripped off Indiana Jones by having him cut the giant gong thing off and rolling it out the window to escape a hail of arrows. The performances accomplished what they came to do. Personally, I like watching The Rock. I don't know if everyone feels the same as I do, but that guy's charismatic. And, above that, he's so much better at fake ass kicking than most action movie stars. One person I like watching way more than The Rock is Kelly Hu. Gundam, that's a good looking bird. And this movie features her in one of two phases, nearly naked, and completely naked. Yeah, you don't see anything because of strategically placed hair, but I'm okay with it. I know that Michael Clark Duncan can really bring it in the acting department, but he left it at home for this movie. He didn't need his acting chops for this movie. It seems like he likes to just do a couple of dumb movies that he'll have fun with, and that's what he did here. I never really believed Stephen Brand as a badass. I just can't see this unimpressive white boy being a threat to The Rock. It's kind of the same thing they did in Shanghai Nights, where they decided the bad guy would be this unimpressive white guy, so they just said that he was the greatest sword fighter ever, so you have to just give it a pass. An unimpressive story and some corny dialogue does very little to remove this movie from the soft spot in my heart, that I still need to get a doctor to look at. Good action, fun times, and an appealing cast, including The Rock in his first starring role and super hot Kelly Hu, makes this movie enjoyable. I actually purchased this twice, but I'm not saying that as cause for you to purchase it at least once. I just upgraded to Blu-ray. I cannot promise that you will have the same kind of fun with this movie as I did, but it's at least worth watching. The Scorpion King gets I'll kill half, you kill half out of no need for concern, miss. When the assignment to review The Scorpion King came down the pike, I realized I needed to do a bit of homework. I'd never bothered to see The Mummy Returns, the Stephen Sommers directed sequel to his 1999 surprise hit The Mummy. Not that I hated the previous film, but I wasn't enamored enough with it to care about the sequel. So I took a pass both in the theater and on video. However, as The Scorpion King came my way, I realized I needed to check out that previous film, since it introduced the WWF's The Rock as the mythical character. My DVD viewing of The Mummy Returns was a surprise on 2 counts. 1. I was amazed at the extent to which the sequel was pretty much exactly the same film as the original, only more so, as in bigger and more expensive. And secondly, and more important to this discussion of The Scorpion King, I was surprised that The Rock and his character had so little screen time in the flick. Based on what I'd heard, and the fact that Universal saw fit to spin him off into a prequel, I'd always been under the impression that he was a major player in The Mummy Returns. There's no question, however, that, as the title might indicate, The Scorpion King is pretty much all The Rock. I'm not a WWF viewer, so even though I was aware of him, I really don't have any investment or feelings about The Rock, positive or negative. One certainly couldn't judge his abilities from his brief stint in The Mummy Returns. It was a pleasure, then, to see that The Rock lives up to his reputation and manages to carry The Scorpion King. He's not a great actor, but neither is Arnold Schwarzenegger, and, like Arnold, The Rock has the looks, charisma, and physical presence to be a solid action star. The plot is pretty much Conan-like, and light, as this is a PG-13 Akkadian warrior. Matthews, The Rock, takes on the evil warlord Memnon, Stephen Brand, who seems to have been cast as the bad guy solely because he has a British accent. He's certainly not any match for The Rock in physical stature. Matthews is aided by a gorgeous sorceress, Kelly Hu, and a rival warrior, the always fun Michael Clark Duncan of the Green Mile fame. Non-stop action ensues at a breakneck pace, all of it guided by veteran genre director Chuck Russell, whose past work ranges from The Pretty Good, Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and The Mask, to the absolutely god-awful, Bless the Child. He's just perfect for this kind of movie and seems to be having as much fun behind the camera as the actors are having in front of it. Needless to say, The Rock's fans will likely enjoy the film, and, judging by my own reaction, the WWF uninitiated should have a fine time as well. It's not even really necessary to have seen The Mummy Returns, although knowing that movie does add an extra level of foreboding to the otherwise cheery Scorpion King, since we know he will ultimately become a bad guy 2,000 years later. So, while it's nothing incredibly special, the film is good fun on its own terms, and worth a look, either in the theater, if you're just dying to see it, or on video in a few months. The Scorpion King is a very silly movie. You probably know that from the outset, considering it is based on the character who appeared only very briefly in The Mummy Returns, and that it stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He plays a man named Matthews, an assassin for hire who is tasked in killing a sorceress, Kelly Hu, who is protecting the tyrant, Memnon, Stephen Brand, from being killed. Some betrayal and twists later, he and the sorceress, along with the bumbling fool, Arpid, Grant Heslov, he changes his plans and decides to go after Memnon instead. That's as much sense as I can make of the plot. It doesn't really matter, anyway, as the film isn't about characters or a plot. It wants to entertain you with action scenes, and when it focuses on that, it's kind of successful. It's ridiculous, contains pretty bad special effects although not as bad as those used in the finale to The Mummy Returns, and doesn't take itself at all seriously, but it never stops being fun. I can appreciate a cheesy film like this if it's done right, and The Scorpion King is done well enough to be enjoyable. Look, sometimes, I just want to watch a movie where The Rock and Michael Clark Duncan go at one another in a weapons and fist fight. The Scorpion King delivers on that, and on so much more. While the CGI is all terrible, there isn't a lot of it. Most of the film contains big men fighting other big men in close quarters combat. Knives, swords, spears, and fists are all used rather frequently, while a single bow and a couple of arrows factor in prominently in places. This is The Rock's first leading role in a film, and I actually thought he carried himself well enough. He's not a deep actor not at all, but he knows how action scenes should work, and he's convincing as an action hero. He seemed to be performing most of the stunts, and when he hits someone, or gets hit, it feels as real as these things can get. He's also a charismatic person. Wrestling fans know this already, and you are not often bored while watching him command the screen. There's less to be said of the other actors, primarily because none of them get the same kind of screen time as the wrestling star. Kelly, who gets the second most time, but factors in very little. The villain is non-threatening, even though he's supposed to be the best swordsman in all the land. I did like seeing Michael Clarke Duncan in the few scenes he gets, but again, he's pushed aside so that The Rock can be front and center. That's not necessarily a problem, but if you're hoping for other actors to share the spotlight, you'll be disappointed. This movie was, in part, produced by WWE Studios, after all. That studio wouldn't want their property having to share the focus with anyone else, especially when there are no real big-name actors in the production. The Rock is supposed to be larger than life, as the television tells me, so it makes sense that the Scorpion King is focused solely on him. Besides, we definitely needed to learn the origins of the villain from The Mummy Returns, right? The 10 minutes of screen time in that movie warranted a feature-length spin-off, didn't it? What I'm trying to get at is that this is a completely unnecessary movie. Yeah, it's fun, but the story is throwaway, the action isn't terribly inventive, and the only real draw is The Rock. The film wants to detail the character's rise to fame, leading to that deal with Anubis we learned about at the beginning of The Mummy Returns, but it's your standard action-adventure affair that just happens to be set in the time before the pyramids. The character was hardly even in Returns, and wasn't interesting enough to warrant an entire film dedicated to him. After seeing The Scorpion King, I maintain that the character isn't worthy of being explored. Okay, he has to learn that being selfish isn't the best. The love interest/sorceress takes care of that, but there's nothing else that's interesting about him. The film is just action scene after action scene, and the screenplay could have been written with nobody in particular in mind, and then adapted to fit the character by tangentially relating it to the mummy. But the film doesn't take itself too seriously, and the action scenes, while uninventive, are kind of enjoyable. It's your standard summer action movie in terms of content, and if that's what you're looking for, you might just have fun. Going in with high expectations is something you won't want to do, although if you've seen the Mummy films, chances are you're not going to have that high of expectations anyway. The Scorpion King is a summer action movie starring The Rock. He's always the center of attention here, and gets all of the important scenes and set pieces. It's kind of fun watching him, and the movie as a whole is enjoyable. Silly, yes, but enjoyable. It's never boring, and the winking it does at the audience is quite funny. Sure, it's not terribly inventive, nor is it really good, but if you're in the right mindset, it can be kind of fun. And that's about where my expectations were set, so I didn't have a bad time with it. Anyone who has no knowledge of the Mummy series won't know that this is a spin-off/prequel to the lame sequel, which was a telltale sign that this franchise has already lost steam. In the sequel to The Mummy there were bad special effects, a terrible story, and only about 5 minutes of The Rock. 3 of which had his computer-generated head attached to a giant scorpion body that resembled a lobster on a rampage. The reason why people won't know the significance of this to the Mummy movies is that this basically has no connection to the movies whatsoever and tries really hard to be its own. The movie says, before the pyramids were even built the Scorpion King reigned. Now here's where logic enters. There's a large plot hole in the movie's storyline that conflicts with the Mummy's storyline. The movie is said to take place before the pyramids were built. This is when the Scorpion King was alive. The pyramids weren't built for another 100 years, so the Scorpion King at that time would have to be very old, or dead. In The Mummy Returns, he is clearly young and healthy and becomes the evil demon guy. That's just one of the many flaws. Let's pick one out of the hat. The acting is bad. We have The Rock, who raises a brow and growls at every moment he gets, attempting to make the wretched dialogue believable but fails miserably. He's likable but barely even believable with his hilarious long hair. It's hard to imagine he turning into the evil Scorpion King, which I won't waste my time with, because there won't be a sequel. Kelly, who cannot display her acting or martial arts chops, because all she does in this is spout corny dialogue and stand half naked. Not that I'm complaining. She's never fully naked, though. No. She's naked enough to attract attention from the target audience, but her hair is always surprisingly down on her chest, covering her breasts, even when she's sliding down a waterfall. The rest of the characters are so limited, especially Michael Clarke Duncan, who is a great actor, but is oddly out of place and does barely anything in this movie to begin with. He appears sometimes to speak a dramatic monologue, throw down in a wrestling-style fight with The Rock, and battle with baddies in the end. There's no emphasis on his character to make him likable, so he's pretty dispensable. The special effects are standard with laughable computer-generated snakes here and there, and some poorly constructed fire scenes. The fighting is nothing new and failed to impress me at all. A lot of it reminded me of the Conan movies, never making anything original or breathtaking. It looks like the choreographer copied a lot of the fight moves from old barbarian movies. A lot of the choreography is so slow and annoying, it's hard to enjoy any of it at all. They also tend to exaggerate a lot of the scenes. At one point, it seems The Rock's character is so powerful, that whenever he shoots his arrow at a bad guy, they're thrown into walls like they were shot with cannons. It's all just so laughable. The movie's mood is all wrong. It should be dark and grimy and gritty, yet is so cheery and light-hearted, making it accessible to young boys to like, but loses the older audience in the mix. It goes without saying that this is a bad movie, but it's entertaining because of that. Come for the cheese, stay for Kelly, who Acadian assassin Matthews, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, is hired to kill the evil ruler Memnon's, Stephen Brand, sorceress, Kelly, who is able to foresee the outcome of a battle before it ever happens. The Scorpion King is a spin-off and prequel of the Mummy series. It is directed by Chuck Russell and stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who is reprising his role as the titular character of Matthews the Scorpion King from The Mummy Returns. This movie, though not his debut, marks the first starring role for the WWE superstar. Given the obvious amount of clear on-screen charisma and charm, Johnson manages to display just how clear it is that this wholly mediocre movie was able to start the transition of The Rock from pro wrestler to genuine movie star. With a sarcastic wit and flashy smile, Matthews goes on a mission for hire to kill Memnon's sorceress. The Rock might give it his all here, but what he's working with is a clear mixed bag. There's no doubt this film exists as purely a mindless popcorn flick to appeal to 14-year-old male WWE wrestling fans. It is loaded with cheesy dialogue and a lot of over-the-top action, especially the opening action scene, which is exaggerated far beyond any of the other action in the film. With a slightly more modest budget than either of the Mummy films, The Scorpion King has far less CGI and utilizes more practical effects. However, when the movie does use CGI, it still looks pretty bad and very dated. Not giant scorpion monster in The Mummy Returns bad and dated, but bad nonetheless. And The Rock doesn't digitally raise his eyebrow, so there's that. The practical effects range from really intricate-looking objects to cheaply made ones you might find at a party store as part of an Egyptian Halloween costume. Despite all of the faults of this flick, it does have a modicum of entertaining qualities, mostly thanks to its rising, shining star. It does have the occasional, albeit unintentional, laugh and a few genuinely fun moments. It only received modest box office success and a less than mediocre critical reception, and it also went on to spawn numerous far worse straight-to-DVD sequels often starring random MMA fighters. In the end, this movie is relatively harmless, but it does feel unnecessarily long despite its runtime. Though it may be a nostalgic guilty pleasure for some, it definitely doesn't hold up well. Don't go into a movie like The Scorpion King looking for depth or the answers to life's questions, and if you try to turn your brain off going into it, you'll probably have a reasonable time and enjoy it for what it is. Yeah, it seems a bit premature when you hear Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the rundown, "Be cool," is the Schwarzenegger for a new generation, but if you look at the kinds of films Arnie did in his beginnings, Dwayne seems right on track. The Mummy Returns is not great, but a hell of a lot better than Hercules in New York, and both started out with sword and sorcery films, with Conan the Barbarian for Arnold and the Scorpion King for Dwayne. However, what the future holds for The Rock will certainly depend on wise choices, and while we can overlook the fact that the Scorpion King is a bad film in his favor, a career of these will make Johnson seem more like the Brian Bosworth for the new millennium. Johnson stars as Matthews, an assassin who is hired as a last resort by some local tribes who have been suffering from run-ins with Memnon, Brand, the evil warlord that wants to rule the land. Memnon has been using a sorceress, who, cradle to the grave, with powers to predict the future of his battles, and while Matthews tries to stop Memnon, he steals away his most precious of possessions, the seer herself. You can already figure that the film isn't going to be very good just by looking at the cast. Dwayne Johnson is making his starring debut. Stephen Brand, as Memnon, comes straight from a crop of failed TV shows. Director Chuck Russell is just coming off of one of the worst movies in 2000, Bless the Child, and a script that had been rewritten numerous times by hacks that haven't made very much in terms of great screenplays. The best that could have been hoped for is that the film wouldn't be the worst movie of the year, and to its credit, it actually succeeds at least in not being totally unpalatable. There are really three types of people who may want to see this, not necessarily mutually exclusive, but I will break it down so that you may know if The Scorpion King is worthwhile for you. First, there are fans of The Rock, Dwayne's WWE alter ego, and to them the Scorpion King may be a mixed bag. While Johnson actually shows some skill pulling off the stunt work, which he did himself, and carrying the film on his back in admirable fashion, the character is different from The Rock, and as long as you are prepared for that, you might be fine. Plus, like the WWE, the Scorpion King is merely an excuse for stunts and phony violence, and the script is about as intricate as a pro wrestling main event. This film succeeds at, if anything, showcasing Johnson's talent as action hero, so it is recommended for you. The next group of people are the fans of the Mummy series, and if you like those films, then you probably just like comic book adventures mixed with eye-popping special effects and hokey humor. Well, The Scorpion King certainly delivers in all of those areas. However, don't go expecting it to tie in any more to The Mummy, as The Scorpion King is a standalone adventure that, if not for the couple of scenes in The Mummy Returns, would have absolutely nothing to make you compare the two entities at all. The Mummy and The Scorpion King are both dumb, really dumb, fun if you like popcorn fluff. What the hell, it should deliver for most of you. The last group is the largest and most demanding, and for which The Scorpion King will be considered a big disappointment, and that is the adventure flick fans. Yes, while there are stunts, special effects, exotic locales, and lots of action, it's all held together by the flimsiest of plot lines, with almost no character development to speak of. Heavily plagiarizing everything from Indiana Jones to Rambo, the film is a mishmash of clichés from action films of the last 25 years, with almost nothing new to speak of save the star. In fact, while there is quite a bit of impressive stunt and special effects pieces, they aren't thrilling in the slightest, and by the end of the film you will probably come away feeling just as empty as you were going in, except $8 lighter. Bad comedy, bad drama, poor villains, historical inaccuracies, and a wafer-thin depth are all compounded to make The Scorpion King another vapid summer adventure sure to be readily digested and quickly forgotten almost as soon as the credits roll. Summing up, unless you are a huge fan of The Rock or a fanatic for the Mummy flicks, The Scorpion King just doesn't have anything fresh or exciting enough to recommend. Rather than go to the theater, why not use that $8 to rent a triple feature of Conan the Barbarian, Raiders of the Lost Ark and First Blood? You will not only go to bed smiling but also wake up without the nasty hangover from time and money wasted. Yeah, it seems a bit premature when you hear Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the rundown, "Be cool," is the Schwarzenegger for a new generation, but if you look at the kinds of films Arnie did in his beginnings, Dwayne seems right on track. The Mummy Returns is not great, but a hell of a lot better than Hercules in New York, and both started out with sword and sorcery films, with Conan the Barbarian for Arnold and The Scorpion King for Dwayne. However, what the future holds for The Rock will certainly depend on wise choices, and while we can overlook the fact that The Scorpion King is a bad film in his favor, a career of these will make Johnson seem more like the Brian Bosworth for the new millennium. Johnson stars as Matthews, an assassin who is hired as a last resort by some local tribes who have been suffering from run-ins with Memnon, Brand, the evil warlord that wants to rule the land. Memnon has been using a sorceress, who, cradle to the grave, with powers to predict the future of his battles, and while Matthews tries to stop Memnon, he steals away his most precious of possessions, the seer herself. You can already figure that the film isn't going to be very good just by looking at the cast. Dwayne Johnson is making his starring debut. Stephen Brand, as Memnon, comes straight from a crop of failed TV shows. Director Chuck Russell is just coming off of one of the worst movies in 2000, Bless the Child, and a script that had been rewritten numerous times by hacks that haven't made very much in terms of great screenplays. The best that could have been hoped for is that the film wouldn't be the worst movie of the year, and to its credit, it actually succeeds at least in not being totally unpalatable. There are really three types of people who may want to see this, not necessarily mutually exclusive, but I will break it down so that you may know if The Scorpion King is worthwhile for you. First, there are fans of The Rock, Dwayne's WWE alter ego, and to them The Scorpion King may be a mixed bag. While Johnson actually shows some skill pulling off the stunt work, which he did himself, and carrying the film on his back in admirable fashion, the character is different from The Rock, and as long as you are prepared for that, you might be fine. Plus, like the WWE, The Scorpion King is merely an excuse for stunts and phony violence, and the script is about as intricate as a pro wrestling main event. This film succeeds at, if anything, showcasing Johnson's talent as action hero, so it is recommended for you. The next group of people are the fans of the Mummy series, and if you like those films, then you probably just like comic book adventures mixed with eye-popping special effects and hokey humor. Well, The Scorpion King certainly delivers in all of those areas. However, don't go expecting it to tie in any more to The Mummy, as The Scorpion King is a standalone adventure that, if not for the couple of scenes in The Mummy Returns, would have absolutely nothing to make you compare the two entities at all. The Mummy and The Scorpion King are both dumb, really dumb, fun if you like popcorn fluff. What the hell, it should deliver for most of you. The last group is the largest and most demanding, and for which The Scorpion King will be considered a big disappointment, and that is the adventure flick fans. Yes, while there are stunts, special effects, exotic locales, and lots of action, it's all held together by the flimsiest of plot lines, with almost no character development to speak of. Heavily plagiarizing everything from Indiana Jones to Rambo, the film is a mishmash of clichés from action films of the last 25 years, with almost nothing new to speak of save the star. In fact, while there is quite a bit of impressive stunt and special effects pieces, they aren't thrilling in the slightest, and by the end of the film you will probably come away feeling just as empty as you were going in, except $8 lighter. Bad comedy, bad drama, poor villains, historical inaccuracies, and a wafer-thin depth are all compounded to make the Scorpion King another vapid summer adventure sure to be readily digested and quickly forgotten almost as soon as the credits roll. Summing up, unless you are a huge fan of The Rock or a fanatic for the Mummy flicks, the Scorpion King just doesn't have anything fresh or exciting enough to recommend. Rather than go to the theater, why not use that $8 to rent a triple feature of Conan the Barbarian, Raiders of the Lost Ark and First Blood? You will not only go to bed smiling but also wake up without the nasty hangover from time and money wasted. The Scorpion King is set 5,000 years ago where men were men and women were, well, half-dressed. An assassin barbarian named Matthews, the Rock, is sent by a rebel king to kill a sorceress, Kelly who is aiding a vicious dictator named Memnon, Stephen Brand. Before Matthews realizes it, he has become a pawn in a struggle for power and becomes pitted against Memnon and his infamous army. During his journey, Matthews will discover friendships, love, and eventually his destiny. First off, The Scorpion King is only 90 minutes long and it never claims to be anything more than brainless entertainment. It fills its huge plot holes with humor and brings forth The Rock upon Hollywood. The Scorpion King is as a film looks great and the action sequences are filled with mind-numbing adrenaline. If you judge this film for anything more than that, then you will be disappointed. There is a reason why The Rock, this gladiator in the wrestling ring, embraced this project, so it will make him a Hollywood star and, depending on his next project, a bankable action star. The Rock oozes charisma and charm. It is very hard to not like this guy. His wielding of the sword and slicing and dicing villains reminded me a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Conan series. The film even scales back The Rock's dialogue to mostly one-liners. What they failed to recognize is that was needed for Arnie in Conan because he couldn't speak a lot of English. English is definitely The Rock's first language. I really enjoyed The Rock as an actor and will be interested to see what he does away from the loincloth. Kelly who as the sorceress is the perfect example of a better actress than her character. This character has little or no dimension except her perceptions and being a trophy. Who is definitely a better actress than that. Her character reminded me a lot of Jane Seymour in the James Bond classic, Live and Let Die, where we have a gorgeous scantily clad female seer being swapped between men. Her relationship with Matthews also reminded me a lot of the 1980s cartoon series Masters of the Universe, which involved a barbarian hero, He-Man, being aided by a sorceress named just the Sorceress. It being a cartoon, those two never fully explored their relationship. For me, the biggest letdown were the villains in this film. We have Memnon, a two-dimensional dictator played by Stephen Brand, who so closely looks like Russell Crowe from Gladiator it's plain scary. Then you also have the very useless Peter Facinelli playing Tachmet, who you really don't like but wonder why they kept him alive at all. Finally you have Ralph Moeller as Memnon's lackey with no explanation to why he even serves Memnon. Aside from the obvious flaws, and there are a lot, Scorpion King does what it sets out to do, entertain us. I would have liked this film to be more Conan the Barbarian than Conan the Destroyer, but there you have it. I wanted this film to be a grand-scale sword and sandals epic. But it is just a pure adrenaline-filled testosterone moment. We've obtained some interesting information on the plot and characters of the upcoming Mummy prequel, The Scorpion King. If you've been following Scorpion King news, you'll know that the film tells the story of the Scorpion King, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, before he became the Pharaoh of Egypt. If you don't want to know more, turn back now, cause we've got the scoop. Beware of plot details and possible spoilers below. There have been rumors that the Scorpion King is called Cain, but the information we've obtained indicates that he goes by the name Matthews in the film. This doesn't necessarily discount the whole Cain thing, since it's possible that he goes by another name at some point in the film. Cain might even be his last name. Matthews is an assassin, the only surviving member of the tribe of a legendary warrior people called the Akkadians. The Akkadians had been hired by the king of Ur to destroy Memnon, an evil warlord whose thirst for power knows no bounds. Before they can move on Memnon, the Akkadians are betrayed by one of their own and destroyed. Matthews knows that Memnon is behind the attack, and soon discovers the secret of his military might. Memnon's companion, the sorcerer or sorceress as it We're a hero who sees into the future and reveals secrets that Memnon uses to his advantage in battle. Matheos attempts to murder the sorceress, Cassandra, played by Kelly Hu, but he's stricken by her beauty and isn't able to go through with it. It turns out that Cassandra isn't a completely willing companion of Memnon, she's horrified by the bloodshed and the visions that he puts her through are extremely painful. When his assassination attempt on the sorceress fails, Matheos flees into the desert where he meets a horse thief named Arpid. Mike Duncan has gone on record as saying his character's name is Balthazar, but we think this is his character. When Matheos first encounters Arpid, he leaves him to die in custody of the Red Guard, but karma soon lands him in the hands of Memnon's army as well. The two heroes meet again during their own executions, both buried up to their heads in the Egyptian sand. As the two are surrounded by a sea of human skulls, they realize that the soldiers carry out the execution by smoking out swarms of deadly fire ants that feed on their heads. However, Arpid has something up his sleeve. He's got a secret plan that allows him to escape. After much groveling, he agrees to rescue Matheos, and the two become friends. Now that he's escaped, Matheos seeks to regain his honor by destroying Memnon and the sorceress. Arpid leads him to Memnon's castle in the legendary city of Gamara, where he must fight his way in and attempt to destroy the evil warlord. The Scorpion King is a spin-off/prequel to The Mummy Returns, released in 2002. It's the year 5000 BC or thereabouts. In what is said to be Egypt before the time of the pyramids, a horde of warriors from the east, led by Memnon, conquers most of the local tribes. The leaders of the free tribes hire the last of the Akkadians, Matheos, his half-brother Jessup and their friend Rama to kill the sorcerer whose magic and prophecies are the source of Memnon's success. After an initial ambush into Memnon's camp results in Rama and Jessup being killed, Matheos manages to abduct the sorcerer, only to find out that the sorcerer wishes Memnon dead so peace can be returned and thinks Matheos is the man for the job. Becoming allies, it also helps that in the process the sorcerer is revealed to be a sorceress. The film also spawned 4 direct-to-video prequels/sequels, none of them seeing Dwayne Johnson reprise his starring role. The second film, subtitled Rise of a Warrior, 2008, is a prequel showing how Matheos became the badass he is at the start of the first film, as well as his quest to avenge the deaths of his father and brother at the hands of the evil sorcerer King Sargon. It also started off the sequel's tradition of having one designated girl fight per film between the action girl female lead and a token dark action girl. The third film, subtitled Battle for Redemption, 2012, is a straight sequel to the first film, revealing that Matheos eventually fell from kinghood after a terrible tragedy and returned to his old life as a mercenary. However, his current mission to help a beautiful princess save her kingdom from the evil warlord Talus offers him a chance for redemption for what he sees as his past failings as a king. The fourth film, subtitled Quest for Power, 2015, appears to be set at an indeterminate point between the first and third films, i.e. after Matheos lost his throne but before the events of the third film, as Matheos betrayed by his apprentice Drazen, a power-hungry prince who used him to steal a relic that could lead to unimaginable power. Matheos now finds himself in a race against time to beat his former friend to the power he craves, aided by the members of the royal family Drazen's father overthrew to become a king. The fifth and final movie, subtitled Book of Souls, 2018, has Matheos teaming up with a Nubian princess called Tala to find a legendary relic known as the Book of Souls to defeat the evil warlord Nebsirek, who has acquired a cursed artifact known as the Fang of Anubis, which can steal the souls of those slain with it and can only be stopped by the titular book. Wasn't the Scorpion King the bad guy of The Mummy Returns? Wasn't he the accursed one whose evil reach stretched across the millennia to hound meddling adventurer Brendan Fraser and meddling Egyptologist Rachel Wise and their meddling little spawn? Isn't he the one I called, in my review last summer, an unholy undead dude? I'm thinking yeah, so I popped The Mummy Returns into the VCR and checked. Yes, the Scorpion King was like an ancient Hitler, bent on overthrowing the world of 3000 BC, the world probably meant the Mediterranean, but still, slaughtering all who stand in his way with his CGI armies, and joining forces with the god of the underworld along the way. Hellspawn hordes obeyed his every whim, and then he was doomed to remain a beast for all time, or something. La la la, now the Scorpion King is a hero. Never mind all that genocide and stuff. Actually, he's not the big SK yet. Right now he's only Matthews, a mercenary assassin. Yeah, that sounds badass, but he's a nice mercenary assassin, the kind whose well-honed combat skills and cat-like senses are thrown off guard by adorable children, who pick his pocket, and beautiful, scantily clad women, who steal his weapons. The Rock is scary in his own way, though. His arms are like legs, his legs are like tree trunks, his hands are like Easter hams, his neck is like a 22-pound Thanksgiving turkey, and he's got really gorilla-plucked eyebrows. It's a tad disturbing. And you go blind every time he smiles, his teeth are so dazzling white. Who knew dentistry was so fabulous 5,000 years ago? Breast implant technology was also quite advanced in the dim recesses of the ancient past, too, as Matthews frequently discovers every time he sneaks or falls or runs into a random tent or chamber to escape whomever is chasing him. There's invariably a mostly naked, silicone-enhanced hot babe to be surprised by his appearance. Unless there's a wizard developing some of that magic Chinese powder that will let even 3rd century BC stuff blow up real good. The Scorpion King is like an enormous Rob Tappert production, he of Xena and Hercules fame, a big-budget syndicated series shot in New Zealand set in a make-believe fantasy past where everybody has nice teeth and speaks with modern accents. All that's missing is Bruce Campbell. But the other requisite goodies are here, like the cut the rope and ride it up while the chandelier falls on the bad guy routine and they and ye shall know the evil ones by their English accents attitude. Which is to say that this is incredibly nonsensical balderdash but damn funny, and only about half unintentionally so. Yeah, it's warmed over Mummy, which was warmed over Raiders of the Lost Ark, but Anubis help me, it's actually a good ride that doesn't pretend to be anything more than that. The plot has something to do with the last free men and elves of Middle-earth massing for a final assault on Sauron. No, wait. It's something to do with the last free tribes of the world joining forces for a final assault on evil overlord Memnon, who slaughters all who stand in his way with his CGI armies and the help of his sorceress, Cassandra, who can foresee the outcome of every battle. Stephen Brand, who plays Memnon, isn't Russell Crowe but plays him on TV probably, and Kelly who plays Cassandra, is very cute and probably has a long career ahead of her as a cellular phone company spokeswoman. The Rock is hired by the tribes to assassinate the sorceress, but of course he is taken by her cuteness and her irresistible offers of 3,000 anytime minutes, and so he doesn't kill her. But he develops a real dislike for Memnon, which is ironic, considering that we know that Matthews aka the Scorpion King is destined to become an even worse tyrant, and so he does get to do some killing after all. You should probably know that there's so much wrestling in this movie that when it comes to pay-per-view they're gonna have to charge $29.95 for it. I won't reveal the unsecret ending, but we get to see it, through one of the sorceress's visions, halfway through the movie anyway. You don't exactly have to be a nuclear genius to guess that The Rock has to win, because we need at least one sequel to explain how he turns from big fighting nice guy into Brendan Fraser's worst nightmare. Last summer's abysmal The Mummy Returns introduced audiences to the character of the Scorpion King. In that film, he was a villain. Not really a willing villain, but a villain nonetheless. One of my main problems with that earlier film was that the Scorpion King wasn't given much screen time. Now, 1 year later, that problem has been rectified. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson plays Matthews, an Arcadian assassin. He is hired to kill a sorceress employed by Memnon, Stephen Brand, a ruthless warlord who threatens to eradicate all of the free tribes in Egypt. The source of his power is the sorceress Cassandra, Kelly who foresees Memnon's victories and gives his soldiers the confidence they need to fight valiantly. When Matthews is betrayed and the assassination plot foiled, he and the sorceress become unlikely allies in the battle to overthrow Memnon and free Egypt from his rule. This movie is a prequel to The Mummy Returns, taking place thousands of years earlier, although there are no real connections between the films other than Matthews. The future Scorpion King is still a hero and a do-gooder here. Some have compared The Rock's role to the first of Arnold Schwarzenegger's action roles in Conan the Barbarian. While The Rock does wield a mean sword, this film isn't as heavy-handed as that early 80s film. The Rock does seem like an Arnold light, cracking one-liners as he cracks some heads, but it somehow seems less corny with him doing it instead of Schwarzenegger. Maybe it's the lack of an Austrian accent. The Scorpion King doesn't take itself seriously at all, and that makes it much more enjoyable. If it were played straight, it would be tedious and unintentionally laughable. Director Chuck Russell ought to know what makes Schwarzenegger tick. He directed him in Eraser, one of Arnie's last big films. This is not a cerebral film by any means. The characters are all paper thin, the action is fairly predictable, and the acting is just barely adequate. Still, the Scorpion King manages to be entertaining and fun thanks to the collection of personalities on screen. The Rock definitely has screen presence and charisma. He's not going to challenge Denzel Washington for any roles, but he's action film good. Stephen Brand, who's mainly been in TV roles, makes a decent, slimy villain. Michael Clarke Duncan, the Green Mile, plays up his role as a Nubian warrior as much as he can. Kelly Hu, whose previous claims to fame have been surf ninjas and Nash bridges, serves up more eye candy than acting prowess, but, somehow, that's okay. Maybe it's the clever ideas the wardrobe people had to come up with to keep her from showing too much skin, but I didn't mind her too much. Overall, the Scorpion King isn't going to win any awards for originality, acting, special effects, or, well, anything, but it still manages to be entertaining in a summer movie kind of way. Since that's what it is, it's hard to fault it for delivering what it's supposed to, a good dumb fun night at the movies. In an era of prequels, it's no surprise filmmakers jumped at the success of Dwayne Johnson's brief appearance in The Mummy Returns and gave him a chance to star in a movie of his own. Traveling back centuries, the Scorpion King tells the story of Matthews, an Akkadian assassin, who becomes ruler of an ancient army. Around 3000 BC, the world is controlled by the bloodthirsty Memnon, Stephen Brand, aided by a sorceress, Kelly Hu, who can see the future and assure his success before he even steps on the battlefield. His swath of destruction is nearly complete until a few scattered clans form a union. In a desperate effort to oust the ruthless tyrant, the tribal leaders hire Matthews and his brother to take out the seer and end the premonitions. Armed with more weaponry than an entire regiment, the skilled killer cuts his way through the enemy's camp and into the clairvoyant's tent. But Cassandra's stunning beauty, or lack of adequate clothing, causes him a moment's hesitation and things go bad from there. Escaping with the girl, Matthews heads back to his desert dwelling with the army on his heels. Like the films in the Mummy series, the Scorpion King has countless victims killed by stabbing, hanging, slashing, and shooting, although blood is minimal. Flesh-eating ants, poisonous snakes, and pits of quicksand round out the death tactics. While the body paint made famous in the other movies is replaced with fabric, there still isn't an abundance of yardage. Minimally attired females, including a class of women warriors, use creatively placed bikini tops, strands of hair, and their arms to barely stay within PG-13 standards. Here's something pointless but kind of fun nonetheless. Leagues better than The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, The Scorpion King has what its predecessors didn't: a sense of humor, a burlesque visual palette, and at least half a dozen killer set pieces. Sure, the B-movie kitsch factor is sort of lost along the way, but there's something to be said about a film that ends with The Rock actively vying for Fabio's place on your mother's favorite Harlequin romance novel. First the good, a catch the peasant boy sequence that cutely engages silent film idiom, female empowering battle sequences that negate all those scenes with the horny concubines, and the entire sandstorm/sandpit extravaganza. 5 good minutes in a 90-minute film counts big time. Even better is Kelly Hu's sorceress Cassandra, who straddles before healing and rises from baths with hair strategically covering bosoms. Now the bad, the post-killing catchphrases: "You're lucky we have the same mother," the not so tongue-in-cheek wisdom, rivers of blood can never bring peace, all the uber-Greek family murders, and every scene with Grant Heslov. For every sweaty skin moment, Heslov kills the mood with his "look, I am a dork in the desert" routine. "It's good to be back in the big city," says the comedic sidekick before sitting at the bar in Memnon's Club Med Palace. While the Scorpion King pops Cassandra's magical powers, Heslov discovers barstool humor. "It's not the size of the hump, it's the motion of the camel. Oh brother, it's summertime, so my 3-week hiatus from seeing movies at the Cineplex shall now be churned into 4 months of enjoying fun, meaningless popcorn flicks." Of course, summer now starts in April, this year with The Scorpion King, a spin-off of the popular The Mummy franchise. The Rock, real name Dwayne Johnson, a former U of Miami football player, attempts to become the young generation's muscle-bound action hero, as Arnold Schwarzenegger did in the mid-80s. And I can say that Dwayne is equal to Arnold's talents from that period. Take that for what it's worth, but this may help. The Scorpion King is just a big-budget B-movie, which is just fine if you accept that going in. And it's short, clocking in at 90 minutes, so you don't have time to get bored. Sorcerer helping evil Memnon ravage the northern African landscape. But do you really care about the plot? Seriously, it doesn't matter one lick, because this is a movie about action, full of cheesy roll-your-eyes humor. What does summer movie season really mean? Substantial death count, and Scorpion King delivers the goods, with lots of squishy impaling and tragic grunts from countless hapless and now dead warriors. The Rock is truly the people's champion, whether on WWF or on the big screen, easily dispatching incompetent worker bees of his enemy, all the while zooming in on the raised eyebrow that has sold $1 million. The final scene is full of wrestling-like goodies, from fire swords, I'd actually watch wrestling to see this instituted, to throwing ash in the eyes your opponent, leaving him screaming and scratching at his eyes, and improbable returns from the brink of defeat. All of which work just fine. Naturally, though, the filmmakers casually ignore that in the future, as The Mummy Returns deals with, the Scorpion King becomes a bad man bent on world domination. Oh, pretty sorceress Kelly, who shows plenty of skin, at least as much as The Rock, except that as a PG-13 movie all her naughty bits are artfully covered by just the right amount of hair and cloth. Rats. Michael Clarke Duncan is a long way from the Green Mile and an Oscar nomination. As the only other recognizable cast member, he stoops to the B-movie level of acting, and is truly horrible, as he should be. Is that talent to be bad, or is it coincidental as he tries to be an action hero? Maybe he should stick to drama, despite his size, which dictates to Hollywood that he plays more action roles than serious. Too bad. At least the bad guy, Memnon, Stephen Brand, is dutifully vile, which, rearranged, spells evil. I don't know why I just figured this out. Why can't I have a harem? There are many porn sites and Girls Gone Wild videos, so I know there are plenty of females willing to devote themselves to a life of degradation, so what's wrong with living in my plus palace, wallowing in lovely fountains and occasionally feeding me grapes? I need a ruling on this. And don't give me that PC crap. Enjoyable sexist flicks like The Scorpion King are not the movies to start carping about women's liberation. This film, directed by Chuck Russell, screenplay by Stephen Sommers, story by Stephen Sommers, produced by Sean Daniel, starring The Rock, cinematography John R. Leonetti, edited by Greg Parsons, music by John Debney. Production companies WWF Entertainment. Distributed by Universal Pictures. Release date April 19, 2002. Running time 92 minutes. Countries United States. Language English. Budget $60 million. Box office $178.8 million.